जय हिंद दोस्तों, मैं हूं मेजर मोहम्मद अली शाह and I feel truly honored and blessed to have my favorite writer. Yes, who needs no introduction? No introduction at all. We have Shobhaa with us. The name itself is enough. Now, if I go on introducing, there's no introduction required in the first place. But if I have to speak a few things, उनकी तारीफ में कुछ कहूँ, तो फिर बहुत कुछ है बोलने के लिए. तो फिर हम अभी सुनेंगे उनकी कहानी, उनकी ज़बानी. मगर मैं इतना ज़रूर कह दूँ that she started her career very early in life, a self-made lady. At 17, she was a model, was a supermodel rather, I would say. At 20, she was writing agony aunt columns for society magazines. At 23, she founded the Stardust magazine, and which became so popular. And there was no looking back thereafter. I mean, Shobhaa Dey has, we all know her. We all have read her columns. We all have read several writings by her. So without wasting much time and without much ado about this, let's go ahead straight to Shobhaa Dey. Shobhaa, thank you very much. And I'm really, truly grateful to you for spending time, Shobhaa.
Yeah, thanks very much. I'm looking forward to this conversation, even though I am a little stressed. I've had, as usual, a very hectic day and a very crazy schedule. But I'm very happy to be in this space and talking to you. So, shoot away.
Thank you very much, Shobhaa. Very, very sweet of you. Shobhaa, we all know you went to Queen Mary's School and then you went to St. Xavier's. But we would like to know a bit about your childhood days at Queen Mary's and your college days at St. Xavier's as well.
Well,
As
my
in, how was Shobhaa Dey as a student?
Shobhaa Dey as a student was not the best student. Her teachers will happily testify to that because my interests were really outside the classroom. The subjects didn't captivate me as much as they do other students, perhaps. I was an athlete, and my entire focus was on excelling on the sports field. I was an athlete and a track star at a very early age with records to my name, the state records and so on, qualifying for the nationals. I was playing basketball, I was playing hockey, I was playing, well, practically anything that I could play at that stage and be good at. So my school days, academics really took a very low priority. Plus, I was compelled to take mathematics and science and trigonometry and so on for my senior Cambridge exam. I had absolutely no head for figures. I still don't, and no interest in the scientific field. So I just about managed my grades to get through and get into college. It was a good thing that I got into college because of my sports and track record. And St. Xavier's was extremely welcoming. They also allowed me to change disciplines, and so I became a liberal arts student, and I opted for actually psychology as my major because English literature was too precious to me. I loved it too much. I loved English, I loved writing, and I didn't want to study it as a subject. I wanted to really take a lot of pleasure in reading on my own and writing on my own and discovering the language as I wanted to without it being necessarily imposed on me via a textbook, though I did have a brilliant English teacher. I was very lucky to have Nisha Decunia as my professor at the college. And college was absolutely fantastic. The best 4 years of my life spent mainly outside the classroom and just discovering myself, discovering adulthood, Bombay, movies, food, music, all of it.
Superb, superb. So tell me one thing, Shobhaa, you started modeling at the age of 17. That means before you had just entered college or you had just entered college at that time?
Just about. I'd finished my finals and it was a small break. I'd gone to a fashion show with my father, who was a bureaucrat. And as it happens, it's one of those stories of being discovered by someone who was the head of an ad agency and walked up to me and my father and asked whether I'd at all consider a career in modeling. And I spontaneously said yes, but my father growled no. And then followed a lot of negotiations with my parents, who were very conservative and didn't quite understand this world. And weren't at all, they didn't want to endorse such a decision. But so long as I kept up with my studies, I didn't bunk college, and I continued to show a strong sense of responsibility in terms of the campaigns I took on. And I was lucky enough to really get the best of all the ad campaigns at the time, being a sari model for the longest time for Bombay Dyeing and Katao and Orke and all the mills, Takassis, lots of mills at the time. It was boom time in India, if you remember, with all our textiles, and the mill industry was at its peak before the synthetics came in. And I was a Pond's girl for 5 years, for example, and traveled a lot. I did all the top fashion shows at the time. There were always fashion shows of a very high level, which accompanied the Miss India shows across India. So I was part of the regular fashion show unit that was attached to the Miss India contest at the time. So I have absolutely no complaints. I got a lot of exposure and discovered a sense of confidence and how to deal with people, how to manage myself, how to manage money, most importantly, at a very young age.
Did being the youngest child in the family among your four siblings help in you negotiating the deal with your parents about you entering modeling? Because normally it so happened the youngest is always mollycoddled.
Mollycoddle to an extent. I had an older sister who was an ophthalmic surgeon. She was studying to be a surgeon at the time, who was very, very supportive. And most of the time, she accompanied me on all the shoots because it was taken for granted that I'd be chaperoned and not be allowed to go anywhere on my own. So it was really very kind of her, and I'll always, always acknowledge that. An older sister who was a lawyer and was manager at Bank of India at the time was also supportive, but she had her own career. Therefore, she wasn't free to come with me on shoots and things. My brother, who is an engineer, one of the earliest from Kharagpur University, and electronics engineer, uh, of course, was away in Kharagpur and he didn't quite understand my world. But yes, they did cover for me a lot of the time. They had my back and managed to convince my parents that it's not such a terrible thing after all.
All right. So tell me, how do you start writing for the magazines, the society magazines, the Agni and columns, and so how did you start with that initially?
Well, as someone who was always writing pretty much since the age of about 12 or 13, but I still have my diaries, writing was something that came very effortlessly to me, and it still does, thank God. But the agony aunt columns and so, it was a long, long time ago, maybe over 50 years ago, if I remember correctly. Probably that long, yes. It was something that was offered to me by Nari Hira at the time when he had hired me as a copywriter, as a trainee, as an intern in the ad agency he was running. And he asked me to run this column as something on the side because it was a ghost-written column. It didn't go under my name. It went, if I remember correctly, under Simi Gariwal's name or some actress of the time. So I was ghostwriting quite a lot in any case. And he must have seen some talent in my writing because subsequently, when he did decide to launch Stardust, he gave me the most incredible break by making me the founder editor of the magazine at a very young age. And then, of course, it was a collaboration that worked very well. We went on to launch Society, and both the brands are still around 50 years. It's the 50th year of Stardust this year. So it gives me a sort of nice sense of accomplishment that something we launched 50 years ago is still around.
Superb. You have written very, very boldly about women liberation and such things, and you definitely believe very, very strongly in that. And I completely believe that God. Let's accept it. God created Adam and Eve. That time, Adam came first. Then God said, "Oh, I can do better than this," and then He created Eve, and then Eve came, and that's how we have. And so you have, in fact, I would say you have contributed a lot in terms of women empowerment, women upliftment. So tell me, what made you feel so strongly as a woman to write about women liberation, which is really admirable, and we all appreciate that, Shobha.
But standing up for the underdog has been a common platform for me from a very young age. that the underdog in a patriarchal society, most of the time, it happens to be a woman, women. So naturally, I gravitated towards that. The injustice in our society are blatant and obvious for all to see. And speaking up was something I've never shied away from. And I felt it was obligatory for me. If I had a platform and if I had a voice, if I didn't speak up, I'd be actually failing myself more than anything else. I've always felt deeply about these issues without it being a political issue for me. It's not an ideology that I'm trying to propagate or wave a flag or any of that. I'm politically non aligned. I am pro humanity. And if I feel in many circumstances it's also a man who's at the receiving end of the most terrible injustice, I would equally stand up for a man. So it's not that it's one of those, I'm not blindsided by anything. I think one should have a sense of fairness in whatever one undertakes in life.
Absolutely. No, Shobha, as we were speaking, I was just hearing your voice, and I must compliment you for having a wonderful voice. And so tell
Uh,
me, when you were starting off initially as a model and you were modeling, so normally there is a pattern, and many models, they tend to enter the acting world as actresses. So you must have had a lot of offers, and with the kind of personality and the voice that you have.
the voice, do you mean as a writer, or do you mean physically you like my voice? Which is it?
Physically, as a writer, so certainly we'll come to that as well. But physically, yes, as a voice, vocal.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Yes, I did receive a lot of extraordinary offers at the time. It was very easy for me to say no because it's a skill set I simply do not possess. I didn't see my in front of a camera, and it was not hard to quickly say thank you very much. I wasn't even particularly flattered because I was assuming that every girl with a certain personality or a certain way of looking, her look was attracting that same level of attention. Maybe I'm underestimating myself, but I did turn down people like Satyajit Ray, it's his birth centenary year, so just imagine, and Sham Benegal and several others who came to me with wonderful offers, really wonderful offers. But the question of taking up any of those simply didn't arise because, like I said, the film industry didn't attract me sufficiently or even remotely to give it a go. So no regrets at all.
I spoke with Mr. Sham Beningal yesterday, in fact, and I would be in a similar conversation with him under 2 days' time, and I'll be mentioning this to him that I was with Shobha there, and I've been very lucky and kind that she consented to my request to interview her, and Shobha also. You have been under a lot of, there have been a lot of people love you, they adore you, and there is one small segment who would try to threaten you or something, but you have never been scared. You have been very bold. You have stuck to your gun. In fact, when we met during the Mami film festival party, that time also you were telling me about how people were actually people they but you have been totally unaffected, and you've been very brave. Now where does that bravery come from?
I know you're making me sound like a Jawan on the front line or fighting in Kashmir or Leh Ladakh, but it's not like that. I'm not a one-woman anti-terror squad either. I just have the courage of my convictions, and that has been sufficient for me all these years. I believe very passionately in what I believe in and what I stand for, and there's no compromise where that's concerned. If I've taken a position, I'm happy to defend it, even if it means defending it in a court of law, because I'm very, very confident and sure that whatever I'm saying is in the public interest, that I speak on behalf of thousands and millions of other Indians, co citizens, who may not have the voice and access as much as I do, but they have every right to be heard and to be represented. Having said that, it is often asked of me that why wouldn't you get into politics? The answer, again, like it was for the movies, I don't have the stomach for politics. I wouldn't want to get my hands dirty. And I was very clear that I would always be outside the political system officially and yet be in a position, I hoped, to be able to comment on what I saw and perceived as certain glaring inequalities, flaws, inequities, and I hope to continue to do that because it's important for people to find a resonance in what someone is saying, someone who's politically completely non aligned and therefore has the credibility for people to actually believe in what that person may be raising, the issues that are being raised. But yes, it comes, I'm not fearless in the way that you might think. There are times when I have wondered whether I have put myself out a bit too much, whether it's worth risking not my own life, certainly not, but risking, for example, I have a large family, and is it fair to subject them to the kind of scrutiny because of their mother? And now, increasingly, with 7 grandchildren, my grandkids might be vulnerable and wonder why their nanny is putting herself out for what? Or my husband, who's a businessman. So I feel very grateful to them that they have never ever tried to inhibit me or stop me from expressing myself. So the fear, if any, it only comes from that there are elements out there who don't always believe in fair play. And I wouldn't want something I have said to impact innocent people, not just my family, but innocent people who may have supported what I have said. So I do what I do with a great amount of responsibility and awareness, but to be afraid, I don't know that four-letter word called fear. In a democracy, I think all of us should be unafraid to express ourselves because that's what a democracy is all about.
You must have read Khalil Gibran's poem Fear.
Yes,
What a beautiful poem. If you may
yes,
permit, I mean, I am so tempted to recite it. I am so sorry. If you
please,
may,
please
please.
do.
For
Please.
you, especially for you, Shobha.
Thank
It
you.
is said that before entering the sea, a river trembles with fear. She looks back at the path she has traveled across the peaks of the mountains, the long winding roads crossing forests and villages, and in front of her she sees an ocean so vast that to enter seems nothing more but to disappear forever. But there's no other way. The river cannot go back. Nobody can go back. To go back is impossible in existence. The river now has to take the risk of entering the ocean because it is now that fear will disappear and the river will know it's not about entering the ocean or disappearing in the ocean. It is about becoming the ocean. That's you, Shobha. That's you completely. That's dedicated to you.
Kind. I wish I could live up to this wonderful, beautiful, and most inspiring poem. And there's another one which I just read recently, not exactly a poem, but a thought and an image that appealed very much to me, which I'd love to share.
Yes, yes,
That
please.
it's Japanese in origin because I'm reading this book called Ichige Ichi, which is written by the people who had written the earlier, very, very successful book, which is more like a philosophy and a guide to living. Uh, and in that, the sage tells the person that when you put your foot into the river, that moment is extraordinary and special and will never, ever, ever happen again because the river will have moved on. The river won't be the same, and neither will you. So it's all about recognizing the moment. And for me, living in the moment has been my driving force and continues to be something that I try very passionately to do actively, live in this very moment. So when I'm talking to you, there's no other distraction, there's no other thought in my mind, there's nothing else but the conversation we are now having.
Wow, that is so inspiring, Shobha. And I know you are busy. You got to go. You have a dozen of things to do. But before you go, I would like to ask one thing which I've been very, very curious about you. Shobha, how do you keep yourself so fit?
Oh my God! Normally, that's always asked to me by ladies at a function when they've listened to me talk about various rights that we should be defending and fighting for, and I'm hoping I've made an impact with what I've said. And the hand goes up for at question time, and all they want to know is how do you preserve yourself, or how do you, I mean, it's very flattering, of course, but I have no magic mantra. I would attribute most of it to a good genetic pool that I was fortunate to be born into. And the rest is really very basic discipline. I've never entered a gym in my life. I don't have personal trainers. I don't work out, but I am pretty careful about what I eat, but I do not diet. So if I'm looking a certain way that you approve of, let's just say God has been very kind.
Superb, Shobha. Thank you so much for being in this wonderful, candid conversation with you. I enjoyed every moment thoroughly being in conversation with you. I truly appreciate you taking your time, Shobha. Thank you very
Thanks.
much. Have a nice
Thanks.
evening.
Bye bye.
Bye, Shobha.